Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, June 21st Planning Commission meeting. Will everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Hardy.
Here.
Mr. Tuckfield. Here. Mr. Marley.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Spatafora.
Here.
Mr. Oliver.
Here.
Mr. Bentley. Present.
Everyone's here tonight.
Yes.
All right, approval of previous meeting minutes. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will vote to approve. Whoever makes the motion, it won't be me, but I will abstain from approving item 7D as I was not in the room to consider that particular agenda item.
All right. We have a
I'll
motion.
make a motion.
Okay.
After reviewing it and seeing that everything matched with my notes, I would make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Motion by Mr. Bentley,
I'll support.
supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
Aye. Except
Anyone?
abstaining
And
from
with-
item 7D.
Right. With Mr. Spatafora abstaining
From item 7D.
from item 7.
D
Okay.
only.
All right. Motion passes. Approval of tonight's agenda. Any discussion?
If there's none, Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion by Mr. Spatafora,
Support.
supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Old business. Mr. Box.
None this evening.
Okay. Then we'll move on to new business and public hearings. Conditional rezoning request, agricultural, AG, and residential, one-family urban R1 to commercial, general C2, and residential, one-family urban R1. Permanent parcels is 0820-300-001 and 0820-300-015, located on the northeast corner of 22 Mile Road and Garfield, Section 20. Mr. Joe Van Ash III, petitioner. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. So as you mentioned, this is for a conditional rezoning that we're looking at these properties this evening, and they are located on the north side of 22, just east of Garfield. So we've been working with Mr. Van Ash and his engineers for several months, a lot of back and forth. I'm sure you saw in your packet some of the letters from internal departments were several months old, so I think we finally got it in a place where everybody's happy and comfortable to move forward. For those of you who may be familiar with the site on the opposite side of Garfield, there was a consent agreement a number of years ago there, and this largely mirrors that product there. So essentially, what you see on the screen behind you is an aerial of the property, and what their plans are is to take the bulk of the farm field and turn that into R1 with the intent to develop single-family homes, and then the front of that lot as well as the existing R1 zoned house and convert that into commercial at a future date. So those are the overarching goals of this conditional rezoning. It'll be, again, as I said, developed using single-family residential and commercial as set forth in the plan. There are some exclusions. I believe it's set as C2 with a few exceptions that wouldn't be allowed there. Our internal department's assessors have taken a look at this, especially for the tax combinations, and they've looked at the legal descriptions, making sure everything lines up with their expectations. As they go forward and develop this, all the ordinance standards will be met, site plan review process will be followed, and variances, if required, shall be applied for and proceed as follows. So the concept plan that you see here, which is essentially the quality of a site plan that you'll see in front of you probably in the very near future, it is connecting to the neighboring Monarch development and then connecting out to the future Garfield Road with a private road in the middle, commercial fronting on 22 Mile. You will see that because of the size of this property, it is very long and narrow. It's actually a property that wouldn't be allowed to be created currently. So in order to make this work, a few of the lots, though they're required to be 120 feet deep, the shortest one is 117 feet and some are longer than that. They do have all the required sidewalks, the green space buffers, as well as a masonry wall will be provided at the time that the commercial area is to be developed. They do intend phase 1 as residential and phase 2 as commercial. There's some conditions in the agreement, if you looked at it, with pertaining to time frames of when it has to be residential, when it has to be commercial. Commercial especially is based on a time frame from when they sell. So if they choose to continue living there for however long they want, they can continue living there as is. The requirements don't kick in until after they sell the property. With that, our departments have all reviewed this, and at this time we are recommending approval of the conditional rezoning.
Okay. Mr. Van Ash, would you like to come up to the desk? Do you have anything you'd like to share as the petitioner? Please state your name and address for the record, sir.
Yeah, Joseph Van Ash, 16609 22 Mile. Just thankful for working with Josh and Jim and supporting what they recommend.
Okay. Petitioners. Questions?
Josh, you know when they're gonna start putting that Garfield in? Was it supposed to be this year, next year?
I believe at this time it's planned for next summer. Is that correct? Yeah, next summer.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone else?
I had just a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Clarify then the residential portion of this development would go ahead, would be first, and the commercial would be within 18 months after it's sold, would be started then.
Correct.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay. And the other question I had was regarding the wall, proposed wall. Does that wall have to extend then, since the current residential area will be commercial, and there appears to be, at least on one of the drawings, residential to the east? Will there need to be a fence at the time that develops into commercial? Will that need to be provided?
Yeah, when commercial develops next to residential, that's when the wall is required. So yeah, it would extend on the rear and east side of that property, yes.
Would the wall on this one as shown, is that required as soon as they start residential work?
No,
It's not.
It is
So
not.
it's only once commercial,
correct,
once it's sold to commercial.
correct.
Okay, now that was a little bit of my confusion. It only showed the one versus where the others would have to be as well.
Yep.
I think that was all I had. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, I did have a question for Mr. Box. Mr. Box, just a verification on the lot depth. I think the lot depth is restricted by ordinance. Is that one of the reasons we're doing a conditional rezoning in this case? And how does that differentiate from a variance, just as a understanding of the procedure?
Right, so I think we ran into this once previously, where essentially, you're correct there, in a roundabout way, getting a variance for these lots through the conditional rezoning process. That's an agreement that obviously, you guys will vote to accept or reject, but it is, because this is a very difficult property to develop, we felt that it was reasonable to have it as part of their concept in the conditional rezoning. It also mirrors what's happening on the other side of Garfield. It's not substantially less than 120 feet. And I know the last time you brought this up as well, I think we did confirm with, I think it was Mr. Orlando here, and he confirmed that that was acceptable, that it can be done through this process.
And I'm less questioning that's acceptable as, I would agree, it's a small amount, and honestly, we might not be able to accept it as a variance. I don't know that there might or may not be a practical difficulty. I guess my question would be, just to understand the reasoning for going one way or the other, and then also, this is probably a separate question to be asked later, where our standard would be, because what my concern would be is, we've seen before, particularly with PUDs, where PUD ended up being a function of a variance. I don't think that's the case here. That's not my read of it, but I would like to make sure that we keep those two in their own lane. So, I'm just mentioning it now and trying to understand the reasoning for it. I don't have an issue with it here, but I wanted to bring it up as well.
Yeah, I think part of it as well was, we didn't want them to have to come back for 50 variances or 48, however
On
many.
3 feet a lot.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Tuckfield. Anyone else? Mr. Spatafora?
Yes, Josh, did you have any enumerated list of the specific conditions that maybe Mr. Van Ash did offer?
Yeah, they were in your packet, in the conditional rezoning agreement.
Okay. Were they enumerated in the agreement? I'm just trying to.
All of the conditions are laid out, yes.
Mr. Box, we have a slight issue. The agreement in the package is not the latest version of the agreement.
And that was my next question.
Yeah,
was just answered.
I'm comparing it to the last version that was sent to the
Can
planning
you-
department.
Can you read those
It's
for the
significant.
record?
No,
conditions?
because there's actually a significant difference in the two versions. I believe
Understood.
there's delineations between, there's paragraphs relating to the lateral benefit fees for the residential property, subsection C, 3C, and 4D is the lateral benefit fees in the commercial property. I don't know what version this is. So either, I would suggest that we maybe pass this matter and maybe get the copy of the correct one to the commission so they could review it quickly. Because I know that Mr. Van Ash has waited for a while on this to make sure that we have the proper agreement in front of them.
I'm seeing the lateral fees in front of me in 3C. That's what you said, correct?
Yeah, I'm looking at,
But it's not in our board packet copy. Well, ours is stamped a draft.
yeah, this is an old draft in the packet, Josh.
My apologies. Yeah, I do see where it's stamped draft. So your recommendation is that we get them the final version?
Yeah, I think there's enough, it's important that they vote on the correct agreement, but I think the nuances are not significant enough that we have to pass this to another meeting. Maybe we can go on to the next agenda item somehow and then come back.
Okay.
Okay.
I think that's reasonable, and then we can go back and print the updated
Yes.
versions for everyone's
Yes,
records.
yes.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but just to reiterate, Josh, the version that you have
This
has
is-
the enumerated conditions embedded
This is
within the agreement?
the version I have in front of me is the packet, is the same version that you have.
Oh, okay.
It is enumerated in our packet.
I guess as far as within the conditional rezoning agreement, though.
So your question, what was your specific question, Mr.
I guess
Spafford?
within the conditional rezoning agreement where the conditions spelled out, in paragraphs or enumerated within there, within our draft copy.
Well, sure, because there's use and development of the property, that's paragraph 3, right? That's one of the conditions. And you have A, B, A is R1, B is C2.
Okay.
I had looked for the dimensions, and I had not found the dimensions, although I assumed that the site plan would be considered a portion of the conditional agreements, and I
Yes.
could find all of those dimensions specifically spelled out within the plan, so I had thought the same thing when I read through the agreement. I couldn't find those line items, but then I assumed that the site plan would essentially cover that.
Yeah,
distinction.
because it shows all of the dimensions.
Right, it shows all
Yep.
those dimensions, right.
Mr. Aloya, was there a significant difference as far as paragraph 3C with the benefit fees? You know, as far as what the standard fees are, or you say there's a difference, there's perhaps a significant revision on the final draft form compared to what we
I think
had?
it's really explained better. There's a difference between the way that we calculate the lateral benefit fees for the residential property versus the commercial. What it states is that the future combined, and it sort of touches on it in the draft, but again, that was an early draft. I'm not sure where it came from, but it says the future combined water, this is for the residential property, the future combined water and sanitary sewer lateral fees payable pursuant to the Macomb Township ordinance, and it cites the sections, for the residential property shall be calculated based on a rate of $2,095.23 per single-family residential unit to be developed. The entire amount of the benefit fees owed for the residential property shall be payable to the township at or prior to, as a condition of obtaining any building permits from the township for vertical construction of the future residential dwellings on the residential property. So what happened here is that we separated it out. There's a subsection D in the final draft, which talks about lateral benefit fees for the commercial property. And the reason why it was done this way is it significantly mirrors what we did on the other side and in the consent judgment. We don't have a consent judgment on this property, but what we did was a conditional rezoning instead. And so for the commercial property, it says the future combined benefit fees payable for the commercial property shall be calculated based on a rate of $2,095.23 per capacity unit factor applicable to the specific commercial use or uses set forth for such uses in the township's table of water system benefit fee and wastewater system benefit fee capacity unit factors. So it's calculated differently for the commercial property. And then it talks about the combined water and sewer benefit fees applicable for each commercial use or single building containing multiple commercial uses, for example, a strip mall or strip center, shall be payable at or prior to as a condition of obtaining any building permit. So that's similar. I think it's just explained better. I don't know it's significantly different, but we made sure we enumerated that out.
But you're satisfied, even though you explain it better in the final draft?
Yes.
That the spirit and intent of what the final draft is consistent
Yes.
with the township ordinances?
Yes, and the final draft has, for instance, the acreage was placed in there for the different properties. The residential property is approximately 13.82 acres approximately. The commercial is approximately 3.15 acres. There's some other things that were included in there, like the plan date and things of that nature. So there were some final drafts that were sent. I haven't gone through, to be honest. And to my discredit, I should have looked at this agreement before the meeting. I just thought it was the last one that we sent over, but I could go through this line by line if you want, but I think we have a copy of it here. I think Jim ran to go get it in front of you.
And he's printing some copies right now.
Okay. But we worked diligently on this agreement. This was something that our office and Mr. Van Tiffelen, Mr. Box, and Mr. Van Ash's counsel worked, and we went through many drafts. It took probably 2.5 or 3 months to put this together, so.
And I have no objection if we want to
Yeah.
table consideration of this and go to the next agenda item if the chair permits.
Yeah.
And then revisit this when Mr. Van Tiffelen comes back with copies.
I just want to get the proper agreement in front because, again, we're recommending the final version of the agreement for the township board's approval. And I have, as legal counsel, in terms of legally how this agreement is, we're very confident that this is a solid agreement.
All right, thank you.
Okay. So at this time, we'll go ahead and table item A and move on to item B. Do I need a motion for that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Meyerly,
Support.
supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. All right.
We will bring it up after the next agenda item.
Right.
Thank you.
Which is item B, site plan, APC Towers, North Avenue and 22 Mile. Permanent parcel 0823 451 002, located on the west side of North Avenue, both north and south of 22 Mile Road, Section 23, Jonathan R. Crane, petitioner. Mr. Box.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. You can see the map on the wall behind you. So as you mentioned, this is part of I know it says Sycamore Hollow, but it's part of the Hickory Hollow golf course there on North Avenue near 22 Mile. A number of years ago, as I'm sure you all saw in your packet, there was a a consent agreement on this property. Part of that agreement, though the residential components were never developed, part of that agreement allowed a cellular tower to be built. And at this time, they are here looking to get their site plan approved to build that cellular tower. The location is identified there in the aerial. And again, that it is part of the right to build the tower is part of the Second Amendment to the consent judgment, or part of the original consent judgment, but there's more details in the Second Amendment. What they're proposing is a tower that is the tree-like design. I don't know if you have seen these before, but they are somewhat common, trying to hide them in the natural environment, if you will. Located just across the drain there from the clubhouse. It will have the 8-foot tall wall with a brick covering enclosure and screen with the 8-foot wide landscape buffer as well. Their site plan does match the approval as part of the consent agreement, and at this time, all departments are recommending approval of this site plan.
Okay, thank you. Is the petitioner in the audience? Please. Oh, no, come up and have a seat, Mr. Frame, and just state your name and address for us, please, sir. Might want to pull that microphone over a little bit closer to you.
Jonathan Crane, applicant for representative for APC Towers. I practice at 1126 North Main, Rochester, Michigan, 48307. Phone number is 248-650-8000. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there anything you'd like to add, sir?
I think your staff has done an excellent job of explaining it. Your reviewers have done a tremendous job of reviewing it, and hopefully we can just move this project forward. Thank you.
Petitioners? Anyone?
I got a question.
Yes, Mr. Oliver.
The tree-like idea, I've seen them. Them branches, are they plastic? What are they actually made of?
They're plastic.
So plastic has somewhat of a short life expectancy. Because it gets brittle. It gets hot, it gets brittle.
It's steel covered with plastic, basically, so that keeps the form. It doesn't sag when you get a day like today or something like that. We've had them up for 10 and 12 years and very minimal replacements. That's about the life of them at this point.
Them branches can handle the wind and all that
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, take all the wind and snow loads and so on and so forth, yes.
Interesting. Then the other
Truth of the
question.
matter is, there's only one person that can make a tree, and it isn't Verizon Wireless.
That, me and you are thinking exactly the same.
But it depends.
That's exactly my thoughts too, and, yeah.
Thank you.
But, do you have a utility center down below?
We will have a enclosure, 8-foot-high brick wall around the building, and the equipment will be in the enclosure, yes.
Okay, generator,
A backup generator, yes.
and will it, it'll be inside the enclosure or on the outside?
Inside, everything will be inside the enclosure.
So you'll get no noise coming out of it or nothing like
Very minimal noise.
Okay. And this tower gets serviced once a month, once a week?
Once a month, van-like vehicle, after construction. During construction, there's equipment back there, but after construction, we tell people once a month. In reality, we have them out there for 6 months sometimes. Nobody ever goes.
That's all I got.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver. Anyone else?
Chairman, I just had one question, Mr. Box. Mr. Box, just to confirm my reading of this, we have a recommendation here, but there's really nothing, I'll say left. That sounds negative. I don't mean it to be negative. There's nothing that the ordinance really speaks to that's not already addressed by the consent here. Is that accurate?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay. So that was my reading, was there's really no variable here. It's mostly just informational only, and make sure that it's abiding by what they said.
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Well, then at 6:55, I'd like to open it to the public. If anybody would like to speak on this item, now is the time to come up. Please go to the podium, you state your name and address, and you got 4 minutes. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Anyone at all? Okay, well then, I guess, I need a motion to do that, so we'll do the motion.
I'll make a motion to open.
Motion by Mr. Meyerly, supported by Mr. Spatafora. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And nobody wants to talk, so we'll have another motion to close the public
I'll make a
hearing.
motion.
At 6:56, motion by Mr. Meyerly,
Support.
supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. All right. Do we have a motion on the item? Anyone?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion, I will make a motion to recommend site plan approval for APC Towers at North Avenue and 22 Mile Road at permanent parcel number 08234510002 for all the reasons set forth on the record by our planning department.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Spatafora,
Support.
supported by Mr. Oliver. Would you please call the roll, Mr. Bentley?
Yes. Mr. Spatafora,
Yes.
Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Marley,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes.
I also
Okay.
vote yes.
And Mr.
Oh,
Mr.
Hold on,
Tuckfield.
hold on. Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
He's not tardy.
Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your
Okay.
time.
We'll move back up to item A. Does the commission need a few moments to look over the packet?
Yes.
Can we have a motion to maybe recess for 10 minutes?
So moved.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Smith,
I'll support.
supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Okay, and let's bring it back to the
You
public.
Motion to bring it back?
Yeah, do we need a motion to bring it back?
Yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Motion to re-adjourn by Mr. Oliver,
Support.
supported by,
Reconvene?
reconvene, re-adjourn, reconvene. Okay, by Mr. Oliver, supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. All right. Petitioner, Mr. Van Ash, come, just, I don't know if there'll even be any questions, but we'll do it the right way. All right, questions, petitioners? Mr. Tuckfield.
I actually have a question for Mr. Loya, but I
Yes,
think we'll
sir.
ask it now. First off, much more readable. I appreciate it. There were some things that I didn't understand and assumed were fine in the first copy that were a lot clearer here.
Thank you.
And also, one of the things I think I mentioned earlier in the draft copy, I was like, I guess all of the dimensions, I think kind of to what Mr. Spatafora's point were there, but I didn't really feel like it was part of it, where this is spelled out as included in the drawing, documents, et cetera.
Yes.
The one question I had was on page 4,
Yes.
with regard to the future commercial use.
Yes.
There's some language in there with regard to special land uses.
Yes.
So I just want to, I read it, but I didn't sit down there and read it for 10 minutes. Do we have the ability to deny a special land use if it does not meet our criteria, or is it just going through the process? Like, reading it, I wasn't sure if it was a review only, or if we actually could deny a special land use.
Well, it says they shall develop it consistent with the C2 zoning district, okay? The concept plan doesn't delineate a specific use, it's just a C2 use, right? So it's not like we're saying, in some special land uses, we say, well, you're allowed to use it for this reason, okay? But we did specifically delineate the types of uses that we would not allow there, okay? And this won't be recorded and we'll run in with the land. So it's a covenant, it's a restriction on the land. But with respect to any special land use stated in the C2 zoning district, we retain the discretion to impose reasonable conditions to the extent authorized by law and as provided for in our ordinances. So they have to move for special land use, and we have to agree to it. So it does give us that authority to do so.
That was my initial reading, but I just want to make sure that you were comfortable that was the case and we weren't just.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then it says again, any request for special land use shall be submitted to the planning commission for consideration.
Right. Very good. I think that was my only other question, other than, like I said, I read pretty clearly, and there was, I appreciate reading it again. I'll probably read it again tonight when I have more time so I can understand it, but thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're welcome. And thank you, Mr. Box.
I got a question for Mr. Bach.
Sure.
It shows 5-foot wide sidewalks on each side.
Correct.
Is that usual sidewalk?
That's standard sidewalks within the subdivision, correct.
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Spatafora?
Within the paragraph that Mr. Tuckfield did mention, I noticed there are prohibited uses within consideration for special land use. And Mr. Van Ash, are you familiar within the agreement of what you're not allowed to do then? Okay. Because it was not in the draft we saw, but it's spelled out pretty clearly. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yes,
Got a
Mr.
quick
Oliver.
question. On that same line, Josh, it looks like you're trying to not have repairs and repair shops and stuff like that there?
Correct.
Oil change centers?
Yep.
But, let's say somebody wanted to put a gas station there, that would comply?
A gas station would be allowed, correct.
As long as it didn't have, or what if they had the gas station and oil change?
The service station would not be allowed.
Okay.
The
Just-
gas station would be allowed.
Okay, all right, got it. Okay.
Is the gas station allowed by right in C2, or does that require a special land use?
I don't
One
remember
of
off the top
them,
of my
one
head.
of the
I think it's
Cs, I
allowed
think
in
it can go in
C2.
as a special land use, and then one of them is by right, but I don't remember
I think
which
it is
one.
allowed in
Allowed in
C2.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Well, then I'd like to open the public portion at 7:12 with a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Oliver,
Support.
supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes. Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item? Anyone? Anyone at all? Ma'am, would you like to? No? Okay. Sir, way in the back, sitting in the back, lots of seats in the front for you, but. I have to recuse myself, but thank you. Okay. All right, then. I guess it's 7:13, a motion to close the public portion
So moved.
by Mr. Oliver,
Support.
supported by Mrs. Smith. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. All right, now, motion for this item. Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval to the Board of Trustees for the conditional rezoning request for permanent parcels 0820300001 and 0820300015 pursuant to the recommendations of the appropriate department heads and applicable to the updated conditional rezoning agreement which we have received this evening.
Is there a date on that?
I was wondering that myself. I'm not.
I didn't see one again as to the date of this.
There's no date on it, but that version is from June 15th, 2022.
Then I would add to the motion, the agreement dated June 15th, 2022.
Okay. I will go ahead and second that motion. Mr. Bentley, would you please call the roll?
Yes, I will. Mr. Tuckfield,
Yes.
Mr. Hardy,
Yes.
Mr. Spatafora,
Yes.
Mr. Marley,
Yes.
Mr. Bentley, yes. Mr. Oliver,
Yes.
Ms. Smith,
Yes.
all ayes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. You're good, Mr. Van Ash. Thank you. Good seeing you. All right, next item is public comments on non-agenda items. Is there anyone that would like to speak tonight on non-agenda items? No? Anyone? No? All right, well, then let's move on to commissioners' comments. Does anybody have any comments tonight?
I had one request, Mr. Chairman. Well, actually, two things. One, just to go back briefly, Josh, on the rezoning request, the conditional rezoning. I'm not sure if there is a definition of where it might be used and where it might not be, but if we can have something, if not definitive, at least a guideline of where we want to use those and where we don't. And again, this goes back to in the past, there was a period of time where we started getting requests and they started snowballing where people were trying to get variances through a PUD. And there certainly are appropriate times where that might be the right route, but it was almost like it was considered a shortcut to doing it. And there are certainly going to be appropriate times where a conditional rezoning skirts that or does it a different way or what have you. But I think it might be good if we had some sort of internal guidance as to when we thought it was appropriate and when we don't, so that we'd have something to go by. I don't know if there's a time to that or how that would work, but
I'm trying to understand. So with conditional rezonings, that's at the request of the petitioner, so they come to us. For instance, this parcel is very complicated.
Yeah.
And due to the fact that there were issues related to the development that we really needed to see there, it was appropriate for them to come for a conditional rezoning. There's a lot of issues on this one. But again, they asked for it.
correct.
You're right. So you're saying.
And they could ask for a PUD as well.
They could.
Appropriately, and they
Correct.
could say, I want to give green space and
Correct.
and then I want all my houses to be 18 inches taller than the standard. I'm not sure it's as much maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe it doesn't need to be formalized, but I've seen this happen before, and basically what happened was after a while, we said as a commission, this isn't an appropriate use of the PUD, and developers apparently understood it because it went from us getting like 4 or 5 in the course of a very short period of time to now we get them on what is much more reasonable for a PUD when you have a difficult property and you want to do it, not when you want to skirt another requirement. Obviously, the petitioners are able to apply for either. I just would rather, or would hope that we can give an understanding to the developers as to maybe where we're interested in it and where we're not. Maybe it crosses a line, but it's reaction to what I've seen before.
I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure. I mean, we could certainly discuss it internally. I don't know that there's a bright line or a guideline or a rule, so to speak. I think each is case by case. And certainly when things are very difficult, there are times where when it's suggested they should consider a conditional rezoning because they're trying to fit
Do too many things
a
and
square peg in a round hole sort of thing, and then there's a cleaner process.
maybe it goes to we have the conditional rezoning ordinance, maybe I should go read it again and the purpose for it. Maybe it's about writing the purpose and saying this is why we have it, or maybe me just reading it and clarifying it and saying that's what we have it there for, similar to what we would do with a PUD. This is what this ordinance is for, this is what we are hoping to do with it.
Yeah.
And then we can always refer back to that and say, hey, we got this request, it doesn't meet up with what we say we thought this was for. So I guess the answer is I'll go back and reread it.
And maybe look at the conditional rezoning form as we have it, because that really coincides with the ordinance as well.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll leave that for myself with some homework. And then the only other item, Mr. Box, was just a follow-up. If it's possible, and I looked on the township website, I could not find one, and maybe there's one there that I did not see, but if it's possible to get us some type of an org chart, I know it was something that the supervisor had mentioned was a big thing that we redid early on, something he'd mentioned, the state of the township. Just for understanding to me, I know obviously Mr. Van Tifflin has been promoted, and we have the DPW department, and we've been getting some department recommendations. I've been puzzled about where people are and what departments they're on. I was wondering if we could get an org chart, because that way I can just refer to it. It'd be a lot easier than asking in those cases.
Yep.
So, and that was all I had.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. as far as the conditional rezoning and the variances and everything, you guys in the planning department sort that all out, correct? Before it comes to us?
Yes, yes. We look at that and say whether things should go through with the variance. There is a line of thinking that we can address that. The variance is really through the conditional rezoning and the agreement as well. It's something we're kind of sorting out internally, but.
And like you said, this took a couple months to get this, just right.
Correct. Multiple drafts.
Right, okay. All right, anyone else? Mr. Bentley?
Just an inquiry about the status of the zoning ordinance rewrite.
It's progressing quickly. Mr. Carlisle from Carlisle Wortman has put in a lot of work, as well as myself and Dave. We're actually going to be meeting next week to do a kind of a first run-through of our first draft of that. So hopefully in the next couple months, we'll have a final version that we can bring before you.
All right.
And just another, I think I requested it before, but I'm looking for, and maybe it'd be helpful to make it as part of the packets, but a graphic of the planning, the master plan, so that when we look at zoning and rezoning applications, we have something that is now approved, the master plan, and to see the new zoning plan or updated zoning plan, if that could be either part of, or if we could have our own master plan copy, probably something that's legible anyway, large enough that I can just bring it along. But it would be nice to have it in the packet, that way we can refer to it right away, and if it's changed or been updated, we can review it at that.
Sure.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay. Well, then we'll move on to the Macomb Township Board of Trustees Liaison update. Mr. Charles Olive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. The board, on the June 8th meeting, they finalized the 22-23 budget to run the township. Quite a lot of work. Financing the department and all the departments. So it was a lot of work. So we got that done. The board has, for the first time, has put out an approved an SAD for a road. And we generally don't do that, Special Assessment District. And I don't know if anyone's been on Chelsea Park on 22 Mile Road and seen the road. It probably would be our worst road in the township. Wouldn't you think that, Jim? So the residents, along with Jim and Josh and all our parties, they got together and they run an SAD. And probably the most interesting thing was that they had 87% of the people that were for it to pay for the road in front of their own house. And generally it's very hard to get anything past 50%. So it was well-needed road. They got 15 years to pay for it. Their rate of interest is somewhere around 3.5. So the residents were all pretty satisfied with that.
What's the cost per house, do you know, roughly?
I thought it was around 30-some hundred.
It's different per house. It's based on how much frontage you have, so it's hard to say.
Size, the length, yeah.
Was there like an average range, or?
Do you know what that is?
10 to 14,000.
Yeah.
So is it a private road?
Well, it's a subdivision road, yeah.
It's a public road.
It is a public road.
It's a public road, but, so that's just something that we did that was good for the residents, good for everyone, so. Other than that, we promoted a new firefighter. bring back, an IT person in the township, and that's about it.
Awesome. All right. What does the budget, I mean, is it online?
Millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, no, I
to
know
run the
that, but
township.
is it online for the residents to see?
I thought it went online, didn't it, Josh? Yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha. All right, the ZBA.
Get your copy.
Oh, I'm sorry, are you?
I could get your copy if you
No,
want.
no, no,
Okay.
no, not at all. Okay. ZBA,
Nothing this evening, Mr. Chairman?
nothing? Okay. Planning Department items?
Nothing this evening.
Okay. Motion to adjourn
So moved.
by Mr. Spatafora,
And I'll support.
supported by Mr. Meyerly. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Motion passes at 7:25.